now that your husband is dead. Grieve, pack your bags, and never come back, my daughter-in-law said at dinner. I didn't answer. I simply placed my napkin beside the empty plate and folded it once. The way Noelle used to like. I moved out without a word. I whispered to myself later. The next day, I went to the bank. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and tell me where you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The dining room felt colder than it should in early spring. The mahogany table, polished just that morning, reflected the chandelier's light like a mirror of everything I'd lost. Noelle's chair sat empty at the head, untouched since the funeral. It had been only 6 weeks. But the air in this house no longer felt mine. Romy, my daughter-in-law, stacked her plate over mine as if I were part of the waitstaff. You really should think about somewhere smaller, she added, her voice sweet as syrup but sharp underneath. Wade, my only son, stared at his phone, pretending to scroll. I waited for him to say something, to defend me, to remind her this was my home, but he just cleared his throat. Mom, he murmured finally, Romy's just trying to help. Help, the word twisted in my chest. I gathered the dishes quietly, rinsed them beneath warm water, the soap bubbles hiding my trembling hands. Each plate carried 30 years of dinners, birthdays, Christmases. Romy called from the table. You missed a spot, Mary. Oh, I mean, Mom. Her laugh echoed through the kitchen. For a moment, I saw my reflection in the window, gray hair pulled into a bun. Eyes hollow, apron dusted with flour. The maid, indeed. When the dishwasher hummed to life, I walked to the hallway where the family photos hung. In every frame, Noelle stood between me and Wade, his arm steady on both our shoulders. Without him, the distance between my son and me felt like an ocean. After Noelle's heart attack, Wade had insisted I stay with them, just until you feel stronger. I agreed, thinking we'd grieve together, but grief has a strange way of rearranging people. They grew louder, busier, I grew smaller, my things were moved to make space. My teacups ended up in the garage. My favorite rocking chair disappeared to the basement. At night, I could hear them whispering through the wall, plans, numbers, words like equity and market value. Sometimes my name slipped in, followed by silence. I pretended not to notice. Pretending, I learned, keeps peace for a while. That evening after dinner, Wade knocked on my door. Mom, about what Romy said, he began. It's fine, I said before he could finish. She didn't mean to hurt you. It's just the mortgage and everything. This place is expensive. I see, I replied. So, you'd like me to help with that? He shifted awkwardly. We thought maybe you could sign over your share. It would simplify things. I smiled, though something cold settled in my chest. Simplify, I repeated. That's what you want? He nodded, relief flickering across his face, mistaking my calm for agreement. When he left, I opened the small box Noelle had kept on his nightstand. Inside were the house papers, the ones he'd made me co-sign years ago when we refinanced. Half the deed still bore my name. Noelle always said, just in case something happens. Myrtle, this will keep you safe. The next morning, I woke early, the house still asleep. The sun crept through the kitchen blinds, striping the counters in gold. I brewed coffee, strong, black, and sat with the keys lying on the table. Each one gleamed under the light. Front door, garage, mailbox, the small brass one to the storage shed Wade had promised to fix. When Romy came downstairs, her silk robe brushed the floor. You're up early, she said. We have a meeting with the realtor later. I turned the mug slowly between my palms. A realtor? Oh, just an appraisal, she said, pretending casual. Standard procedure before selling. It'll benefit everyone. Everyone. I rose, walked to the counter, and picked up the ring of keys. If you're so eager to run the place, you might need these more than I do. I placed them in her manicured hand. Her smile faltered. Good luck with the mortgage, I said, and left the kitchen. By the time Wade woke, I was gone. The car trunk held only my suitcase and Noelle's photo. I didn't leave a note. They had the house, the bills, the silence they seemed to crave. The road stretched out ahead, lined with budding trees. For the first time in months, I breathed easily. I didn't know where I was going, only that I wasn't heading back. I drove until the interstate flattened into long gray ribbons and the radio turned to static. The morning light was thin and steady over the fields, and the air through the cracked window smelled like cut hay and gasoline. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the photo of Noel wedged between the cup holders. He was smiling in that way he did when he wanted me to stop worrying. It didn't work this time, but I appreciated the effort. The first sign for a town with a bank made me take the exit. A grocery store, a hardware shop with a bell on the door, a brick building with a blue logo and a flag out front. I parked beneath a maple just starting to leaf and ran a comb through my hair in the rearview. On the sidewalk, a young couple argued softly over a stroller with a missing wheel. Life kept moving, even when yours didn't. Inside, the bank smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. A woman with a nameplate that read, Sandra, branch manager, asked how she could help. I told her I needed certified copies of old loan documents and a statement showing who was on the mortgage and who had been paying it for the last year. I kept my voice even. My hands didn't shake. We can request those, she said, kind but brisk. It may take a few hours to pull everything. I have time, I said. I had all the time in the world. She brought me to a small office with a glass door and a print of a lighthouse on the wall. I stared at that lighthouse while she typed. It stood against wind and spray, the light steady. When she left to make phone calls, I opened my purse and took out Noel's will, folded and refolded until the edges had softened. He had signed it again 2 years ago after the refinance, insisting my name stay where it always was. He'd said it on a Tuesday while eating chili out of a mug, you first. Myrtle, that's the rule. I used to tease him about being old-fashioned. Now I clung to it like a rope. Sandra returned with a small stack of papers and a bottle of water. You've been a co-borrower since the first refinance, she said, sliding the pages across, and according to our records, the autopay has come from your late husband's account. Now your account, for the past 10 months. I'm sorry for your loss. I nodded, thank you. She hesitated. Do you want to add any fraud alerts? Change online access, that sort of thing? No, I said, not yet. When I stepped outside, the sky had cleared to a pale blue. I sat in the car and watched the sun lift off the hood like a coin. Across the street, a diner had a chalkboard sign promising fresh pie. I wasn't hungry, but I went in anyway and ordered coffee. The waitress wore turquoise earrings and called me, hun. I took a sip and felt heat spread through me. Gentle and honest. I hadn't felt anything simple and honest in weeks. After coffee, I found a quiet corner in the library and called Martin Reynolds, the attorney who'd handled Noel's papers. His voice came warm, steady, the same as it had been in the conference room after the funeral when he'd laid his hand over mine so I could sign without smudging the ink. Martin, I said, I left the house. He didn't ask why. Where are you? About 60 miles south, a small town with a lighthouse print in the bank. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I need to make sure I'm not leaving anything tangled. You're not, he said. Your name is on the deed and the note. If you wish, we can record a notice that you won't assume further maintenance responsibilities while you're not in residence. And we can prepare a letter to the servicer. It won't change the payment due dates, but it will make clear who is initiating any requests. I'd like that, I said. I'll email you drafts, he added, and Myrtle, don't worry about them listing the property or having appraisers over without you present. You have rights. Rights, I repeated. The word felt like a coat taken off the back of a chair and put on again. Familiar in the shoulders. I thanked him and promised to check my email at the library. Before hanging up, I added, please don't contact Wade or Romy yet. Understood. It was almost noon when I stepped back into the sun. The town's water tower made a humming sound. Somewhere nearby, a mower coughed to life. I walked 2 blocks to a small motor court, the kind with a single-story row of rooms and green doors. The sign said, weekly rates. The man at the desk handed me a key attached to a plastic diamond and a remote with one missing battery. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old air that had nowhere to go. I opened the window anyway. I placed the house keys on the nightstand as if they might roll away. The ring felt heavier now that I wasn't the one holding a household together. I set Noelle's picture beside them and the papers from the bank in a neat stack. My suitcase took the chair by the window. The bedspread had a pattern of blue squares like a quilt someone gave up on. I lay down for a moment and listened to the hallway ice machine. The traffic. A dog barking 3 rooms over. Sleep wouldn't come. That's the thing about leaving. Your body goes before your mind does. My mind was still at the mahogany table, still measuring the distance between Romy's smile and Wade's silence in inches and miles. I got up, made a list on hotel stationery. The list was quiet and practical. County recorder, confirm status of deed. Insurance, remove my personal property from coverage at that address. Post office, change of address, temporary. Social Security, update mailing if I stay longer than a month. Storage unit, month to month near here. Email Martin, approve letters. Call Ruth, not yet. At the bottom I wrote, in smaller letters, breathe. By late afternoon, the letters from Martin had arrived in my inbox. I walked back to the library, printed them for a small fee in quarters, and signed where he'd put little sticky arrows. The librarian gave me a manila envelope and a smile. We can scan them back for you, she said. I watched the machine pass light over my name. Slow and deliberate. When we finished, I stepped outside and let the warm air sit on my skin. At 5 o'clock, my phone rang. Wade. I watched his name flicker on the screen and then go dark. A minute later, it rang again. I let it. On the 3rd try, I answered. Mom, where are you? His voice was tight, the way it gets when he's looking for his car keys and swears he left them by the door. Romy said you handed her the keys and just left. I did, I said. You can't just leave. We have things to sort out. I'm sorting them, I replied. How did the kitchen look after I left? Did you run the dishwasher? It was a small, gentle meanness, and I allowed it. He exhaled. This isn't funny, Mom. The mortgage is due in 2 days. So pay it, I said. I kept my voice even. Steady. You told me last night you wanted to simplify things. Consider this part of it. A beat of silence. Romy didn't mean what she said. She was stressed. The realtor. Don't, I said softly. Don't use stressed when you mean unkind. I'm just trying to keep it together here, he said, smaller now. You can't put me in the middle. You put yourself there, I said. The words surprised me with how calm they sounded. Like stating a weather report. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. I ended the call before he could answer. My hand trembled for the first time all day. I sat on the library steps until my breathing matched the rhythm of cars stopping and going at the light. In the evening, I walked to the river trail behind the motor court. The path wound beneath cottonwoods, their leaves making a sound like 1,000 small hands applauding. I counted my steps to slow my mind. After the funeral, I'd done the same, counting teaspoons of sugar. Counting the stairs to the bedroom I no longer felt I'd earned. Grief made numbers out of everything. I understood that now. I thought of the house. Of Noelle's shoes lined neatly under the bench by the door even though I'd boxed them months ago. Of the way light fell across the stairs at 4:30 p.m. in summer. Some places keep your fingerprints even after you wash your hands. Back in the room, I made instant oatmeal with hot tap water and ate it standing by the sink. The motel TV showed a game show with bright lights and bells. I turned the volume low and let the colors float across the wall. After a while, I called the number on a flyer for short-term rentals. A woman named Diane had a studio above her garage that smelled. She promised, like cedar and laundry soap. Month to month, she said, and I'm 2 blocks from the bus line. I'll see it in the morning, I said. I hung up and opened my purse. The ring of keys looked dull now, as if they'd lost their job and were too proud to admit it. At midnight, the phone lit up again. A text from Romy, you're being dramatic. We were trying to help you. You know you can't handle a house that size. Be reasonable and come back so we can talk like adults. A second message followed, also. Where did you put the file with insurance info? The realtor needs it. I set the phone face down and turned off the light. The room deepened into blue squares and quiet. I slept for 2 hours and woke with my heart pounding. A dream of the dining room chandelier swaying without wind. I sat up, took 3 long breaths, and pictured Noelle's hand closing over mine on the steering wheel. Drive, just drive. Morning came pale and clean. I returned to the bank to notarize the letters and mailed them at the post office, where a clerk in a denim shirt wished me good luck without asking why. Diane's garage studio was exactly as she'd said, cedar walls. A small window that looked toward a maple. A hot plate. A narrow bed with a clean white cover. She showed me where she kept extra towels and a jar of buttons she'd collected for years. You can take a few if you need them, she said. Everyone needs a spare button. I paid the first month and moved my suitcase to the corner. I hung Noelle's photo above the small desk with 2 pushpins. I stood back and measured the distance from his eyes to mine. It was the right height. That afternoon, I took the bus to the county building. The clerk wore a necklace shaped like a tiny apple and explained where to find the recorder's office. In the waiting area, a man in work boots hummed a hymn under his breath. When my number was called, I stepped to the counter and slid the notice across. The woman there read it and looked up at me with a kind of precise sympathy. "This will go on the record today," she said. "Do you want a certified copy?" "Yes," I said. 2. Back outside, I sat on the steps with the envelope on my lap. A breeze lifted the corners. I imagined paper traveling through systems. 1,000 small switches flipping, here, 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 not a weapon, not a threat, just clarity. On my way back to the bus stop, I passed an antique store with a display of mismatched teacups. Through the window, their saucers made perfect little moons in a row. I almost went in to buy one. Then kept walking. I didn't need to build a life with objects today. Today required only air and a chair to sit in. The phone rang again near sunset. Wade. I let it ring once. Twice. On the 3rd ring, I answered. "Mom, I paid the mortgage," he said, blunt, tired. It wiped out our checking. "The appraisal is tomorrow. Romy wants to know if you'll come back for it." "No," I said. "You don't need me to show an appraiser where the stairs are." "She wants to make this right," he added quickly, as if the words could outrun themselves. "It's not about right," I said. "It's about respect." He was quiet for so long I thought the line had dropped. Then, softer than before, "How'd I fix that?" I closed my eyes. The maple outside the studio scraped the siding like soft sandpaper. "You listen," I said, "and you stop letting other people speak for you." He didn't defend himself. "Not this time." "Okay," he said. "Can we talk tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow." I ended the call and set the phone beside the photograph. I opened the window and let the evening in. Across the alley, someone practiced scales on a piano. Slow and careful. Do, re, mi. Start at the beginning. Climb a little. Hold your breath. Come back down. I stood there a long time, counting the notes, not afraid of the silence between them. Before bed, I wrote another list. This one didn't need bullet points. Breathe. Walk the trail. Find a thrift store mug. Call the utilities. Remove my name from anything in that house. Ask Martin about a mailbox rental. Save every message. Don't explain what doesn't need explaining. I put the list under the photograph, turned off the lamp, and lay down. Somewhere, Wade would be measuring the distance from the kitchen to the living room. Learning the weight of a key ring he'd wanted so badly. Somewhere, Romy would be rehearsing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Somewhere, the mahogany table would gleam under light without bodies around it. I counted backward from 100. At 72, I stopped counting. I pictured the lighthouse from the bank print. Light turning in a slow, patient circle, saying the same thing over and over. Not unkindly, "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. If you're still with me, thank you. Tell me the city you're listening from." I like to imagine the map of all of us, dots of light, holding steady. One quiet story at a time. The next morning began with the sound of rain tapping on the tin roof above the studio. It wasn't heavy, just a steady rhythm like fingers on glass. I made coffee on the hot plate and watched the steam drift toward the small window. Outside, the maple tree looked washed clean. every leaf trembling. I thought about Wade's voice the night before, quiet, uncertain, younger somehow, and wondered if he'd slept at all. The phone stayed silent. I didn't reach for it. I'd learned that silence can be its own kind of sentence. Instead, I opened a notebook I'd bought at the dollar store and wrote today's date on the first line. Beneath it, one word, begin. By mid-morning, I walked to the library. The air smelled of wet pavement and lilac from the bushes near the steps. Inside, the same librarian waved. I sat by the window with my coffee and opened the local paper. There was a small article about a community garden needing volunteers. I read it twice. Dirt, seeds, sunlight, things that grew when given a chance. I wrote down the phone number on a scrap of receipt paper and tucked it in my pocket. Around noon, my phone finally buzzed. Wade again. I waited through 4 rings before answering. Hi, Mom, he said carefully. We had the appraisal this morning. Oh? Yeah, it went fine, I guess. Romy's not happy. The value came in lower than she expected. Lower than the dream, I said. He sighed. She's stressed. We both are. The bills. I cut him off softly. Did you get the letters from the lawyer? I did. You filed them? Yes, it's all official now. He was silent for a beat. So, that's it? For now, I said. You wanted to simplify things. This is simple. He tried to laugh, but it cracked halfway out. You sound different. I am, I said. I'm busy drinking my coffee. He murmured something I didn't catch. Then, almost a whisper, Romy wants to apologize. She can, I said, just not yet. Are you safe? I'm fine. I miss you. I let that hang there, soft as the rain outside. Then do better, I said, and ended the call. The rest of the day moved quietly. I went to the post office, mailed the signed copies Martin had asked for, and stopped at the thrift store next door. I found a white mug with a chip on the rim and a small ceramic bird that fit in my palm. At the register, the clerk said, "That one's 50 cents. I paid in quarters and walked out smiling. Back at the studio, Diane was sweeping her porch. She waved her broom like a flag. You settling in, dear? I am, I said. You keep a nice garden. Come by tomorrow, she said. I'm trimming the roses. You can take a few cuttings if you like. I'd like that. That night, I arranged the mug and the little bird on the windowsill beside Noel's photo. For a moment, I could almost feel him in the room, approving quietly the way he always did, with a nod. Not words. When the rain stopped, the air turned crisp. I opened the window to let it in. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn sounded, low and lonely. I thought of all the mornings I'd stood in that old kitchen, waiting for Wade to come downstairs for breakfast, telling myself that patience was love. Maybe it had been, or maybe it was just habit. The next day, I joined the community garden. The coordinator, a retired teacher named Evelyn, showed me the plots, tiny rectangles of earth bordered by old bricks. You can start with this one, she said. The last lady planted tomatoes. You'll need to turn the soil. I nodded. My hands hadn't touched dirt in years. I knelt, pressed my fingers into the damp earth, and felt it crumble, cool and alive. Evelyn smiled. That's the best therapy I know, she said, and left me with a trowel. I worked for hours, pulling weeds, loosening clumps, breathing. The ground gave a little under my weight. Like forgiveness. When I straightened up, my knees ached and my heart felt strangely light. I wiped my hands on my jeans and looked at the sky. It was blue again. That evening, Wade texted, "Mom, the bank called. They said something about your notice. Romy's furious. She thinks you're trying to take the house." I typed slowly, "I'm not taking anything. I'm just done giving it away." No reply came. The days settled into a rhythm. Morning coffee, garden work, library visits, quiet dinners alone. The ache of loss dulled into something manageable. Like an old scar you forget until the weather changes. I began to see myself not as a woman who'd been cast out, but as someone who'd walked away before the fire reached her. One afternoon, while pruning the small tomato vines that had begun to sprout, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but the screen showed an unfamiliar number from my old town. "Mrs. Harper?" a man's voice asked. This is Doug from the appraisal office. I was just following up on the property visit last week. Are you planning to attend the closing inspection? I'm not, I said. You'll need to speak with my son or his wife. He hesitated. Well, ma'am, I wanted to confirm, there's an issue with the documents. The deed lists you as co-owner. Both signatures are required for any sale. I know, I said quietly. That's correct. I just wanted to make sure you were aware. He said. I am, I replied. Thank you for the reminder. After we hung up, I sat on the bench by the garden gate and laughed softly. The way you laugh when life finally hands back a piece of what it took. That night, another message from Wade. Romy says you're sabotaging us. I wrote back, no, I'm protecting what your father built. He answered minutes later, she wants to talk. Please, Mom, just one dinner, neutral ground. Asterisk not yet, I sent. When you're ready to talk without her whispering for you. I placed the phone face down and turned off the lamp. The dark didn't scare me anymore. A week later, the garden held its first volunteer gathering. Evelyn brought lemonade and folding chairs. A man in his 70s told stories about his late wife who used to bake pies for the church. Someone brought a radio, and an old country song hummed through the air. I found myself laughing, actually laughing, when Evelyn told me my tomatoes were show-offs. Later, as the sun slipped low, I noticed a familiar car parked by the curb. Wade stood beside it, hands in his pockets, looking out at the garden. He looked older than I remembered, tired around the eyes. I wiped my palms on my jeans and walked toward him. Hi, Mom, he said. Hi, Wade. I didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't. We stood in silence for a moment, the air filled with the smell of soil and lemonade. Finally, he spoke. The bank confirmed what you said. The deed, the payments, everything. Good. She's angry, he said. She said I should choose. And? He looked down at his shoes. I told her I'm tired of choosing sides in a house that doesn't feel like home. I nodded. That's a start. He took a deep breath. I just wanted you to know. I get it now, how she talked to you. How I didn't stop it. I see it all. The words came out rough. Real. For the first time, I believed him. I'm not asking you to fix it, I said, just to see it. I do. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single key, the one to the front door. The brass dull from use. You might want this, he said. I shook my head. Keep it, you'll need it more. He looked confused. Mom. I'm fine here, I said. This place has sunlight and quiet. That's enough for now. He nodded slowly. Can I visit? Of course. Just call first. Bring your own coffee. He smiled then, small but honest. Deal. When he drove away, the garden lights flickered on one by one. I sat on the bench and watched the sky turn the color of apricots. For the first time in months, the ache in my chest wasn't grief. It was relief. Later that night, I wrote another line in my notebook under begin asterisk. Forgive, but remember. I closed it, placed it beside Noelle's photo, and whispered into the quiet room. We're all right now. The rain returned before dawn, soft against the roof, steady as breathing. Somewhere, in that house I used to call mine, the mortgage statement would arrive in the mailbox. I imagined Romy's face when she opened it. Saw both our names still printed there side by side. Not a battle cry, just the truth she couldn't scrub away. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me the city you're in. I like to know how far a little piece can travel. The next few weeks passed in quiet rhythm. Morning sunlight slid across the cedar walls of the studio, painting long gold bars over the bedspread. I woke early, made coffee, and walked the 2 blocks to the garden before the heat settled in. The air there smelled of damp soil and basil. My hands grew strong again, tanned and streaked with dirt. I liked it. Dirt doesn't lie. Wade called sometimes, short conversations at first. He'd talk about work, the kids, the weather, not the house, not Romy. I didn't press. He needed to find his own footing before he could look me in the eye again. One afternoon, I came home from the garden to find a small envelope wedged under my door. No stamp, no name. Inside was a photo, an old one. Me, Noel, and Wade standing in front of the house when it was newly painted. The lawn still patchy. On the back, someone had written in Wade's handwriting, "She's gone." I sat on the edge of the bed and read it again. The words were plain, no punctuation, just truth. I didn't need details. I could imagine how it happened, Romy's final outburst. Her refusal to live under a roof that wasn't entirely hers. The sound of a suitcase zipper. The slam of a door. I folded the note and slipped it between the pages of my notebook. That evening, I went down to Diane's kitchen for dinner. She had made meatloaf and mashed potatoes. And we ate with the windows open. She talked about her late husband and the years she'd spent running the hardware store. "People think loss makes you weak," she said. "It doesn't, it just shows you what's real." When I went back upstairs, the air smelled of rain again. I opened the window, let the cool drift in. For a moment, I imagined the house without Romy's perfume clinging to the curtains. Without her voice sharp in every room. I imagined Wade standing there alone. Maybe breathing easier than he had in years. A few days later, he showed up unannounced. I was at the garden, trimming the vines. I saw his car pull up by the curb, dust curling around the tires. He walked over slowly, shoulders hunched like a man carrying something heavy but invisible. "Hey, Mom." "Hey," I said, "you look tired." "I am." He gave a small laugh. "The house is too quiet." "Quiet can be good," I said. He nodded. "I know." We stood there a while, watching bees hover over the marigolds. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "It's the latest mortgage statement. I thought you'd want to see it." "I don't," I said gently. He looked down. "I paid it. All of it. Sold my truck. Used the savings. It's clear now." I studied his face. The lines that hadn't been there before. "That's a big step." "I owed you that," he said. "Dad too." I touched his arm. "You don't owe me anything. Wade, you just had to remember who you are." He looked away, blinking hard. "Romy said the house was everything. I thought keeping it meant keeping us together." "Sometimes letting go does that better," I said. He helped me carry a basket of tomatoes to the shed, and we worked side by side in silence. When we finished, he turned to me. "Would you ever come back? Just to visit?" "Maybe," I said, "if the house feels like a home again." He nodded. "I'll make it one." He left just before sunset. The air shimmered with the smell of cut grass and warm earth. I sat on the garden bench and watched him drive away, the taillights fading like embers. That night, Diane knocked on my door holding a letter. "This came for you," she said. "Looks like lawyer mail." Inside the envelope was a copy of the finalized deed transfer, showing my portion of the house reinstated under my name alone. A note from Martin clipped to the corner read, "Confirmed. Property secured. No further action required unless you choose to sell." I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Safe. Mine. Not a victory. Exactly, just equilibrium returning. I put the document in a drawer beside Noel's photo. Days later, a small package arrived from Wade. Inside was a framed picture of the garden where I used to plant roses behind the house. Long before Romy ever appeared. Tucked behind it was a handwritten note. "We're replanting them this weekend. Emma wants the pink ones you liked. Love, W." I smiled. The simplest gestures are the loudest. At the garden that afternoon, Evelyn asked if I wanted to help with the new sign for the entrance. "We need something hopeful," she said. I painted Harbor Garden in white across a piece of reclaimed wood. When I stepped back, the word harbor caught the light. A place for ships to rest. A place for people to breathe. In the evenings, I started cooking again, not for anyone else. Just for me. Stew that simmered for hours. Cornbread with too much butter. The smells filled the small room and reminded me that comfort could exist without an audience. A week later, Wade called again. "Mom," he said, "Emma wants to see you. She misses Grandma." "I miss her too," I said. "Can we drive down Sunday?" "Of course. There's plenty of room here for 2 guests and 1 small whirlwind." When they arrived, Emma ran up the steps holding a bouquet of wildflowers tied with a shoelace. "Grandma, Daddy says we're planting roses again." "That's right," I said, kneeling to hug her. "Pink ones, just like before." Wade stood behind her, smiling. The weariness was still there, but it had softened. We spent the afternoon walking to the garden. Emma chased butterflies between the rows, her laughter scattering like seeds. When she tripped and fell, I reached for her hand, and Wade reached at the same time. Our fingers brushed, steadying the same small person who carried both our names. Back at the studio, I poured lemonade. Wade looked around the small space. You really like it here? I do, I said. It's honest. Everything fits. He nodded. I get that now. Before they left, he lingered at the door. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. I touched his cheek lightly. You were worth waiting for. After they drove away, I sat by the window with my notebook. The pages were filling up, dates, thoughts, fragments of peace. I wrote one more line before closing it. Home isn't a place. It's a moment when no one calls you the maid. The rain returned that night, gentle and forgiving. I turned off the lights and lay still, listening to it move across the roof. Somewhere out there, in the house we built and nearly lost, the roses would soon be blooming again. If you're still here, listening, tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes, knowing someone out there understands is enough. The Sunday visits became routine. Every other week, Wade and Emma drove down the old highway, bringing groceries I didn't ask for and stories I didn't know I needed. The sound of Emma's laughter filled the small studio, her shoes tapping across the wood floor like tiny reminders that love could return in smaller, gentler forms. Sometimes she'd draw pictures while I cooked, me with gray hair and flowers in my hands, her daddy smiling beside me. One afternoon, she held up a drawing and said, "That's you, Grandma, you're planting magic beans." I smiled. Are they going to grow into a castle? She shook her head. No, into a big hug. That kind of truth only comes from children. By early summer, the garden overflowed with color. The tomatoes climbed their cages, and the roses Diane had given me finally bloomed, pale pink with edges of cream. I brought a few home, placing them in a chipped vase by Noelle's photo. The room smelled like something living again. Wade had started fixing up the house piece by piece, painting the porch, replacing a broken step, planting grass where weeds had taken over. It feels lighter, he told me one afternoon over the phone. Different. Maybe it's the quiet, I said. Maybe, he answered, or maybe it's because I'm not walking on eggshells anymore. He didn't say Romy's name, and I didn't ask. Some chapters don't need to be reread. That week, a letter came from the bank confirming the mortgage was fully paid. The page was thin, the ink faint, but the words felt heavy in my hands. Loan satisfied. Account closed. I folded it neatly, put it in the drawer with the deed. The house was free again, clean of debt, of fear, of manipulation. The following weekend, Wade invited me to come see it. It's different now, Mom, you'll see. I hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, he said. Emma keeps asking when Grandma's coming home. So I went. The drive felt shorter this time, the turns familiar but softer. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already on, though it was barely sunset. The house looked new in the simplest way, curtains open, windows clean, a pot of yellow daisies by the steps. Wade met me at the door. Welcome home, he said quietly. I stepped inside. The air smelled of lemon polish and something baking. The dining table, Noelle's table, stood gleaming again. No clutter, no tension, just space. I traced my fingers over the wood. You sanded it. 3 times, he said, smiling. Emma helped. From the kitchen came her little voice, Grandma, close your eyes. When I did, she led me by the hand, her small fingers warm and sticky from frosting. Okay, open. On the counter sat a lopsided cake, pink icing sliding down the sides. The words "Welcome home" written in uneven letters. My throat tightened. I managed a laugh. It's beautiful. It's crooked, she said proudly, just like us. I cut 3 slices. We ate in the living room, the same room where I used to feel invisible. The walls seemed to breathe differently now, lighter somehow. After dinner, Wade took Emma upstairs for a bath. I wandered through the house alone. In the hallway, I stopped at the framed photo of Noelle and me from years ago, the one that had once hung crooked because Romy said it clashed with her decor. Now it was centered, straight. I walked into the guest room, my old room. Fresh linens, a vase of daisies on the nightstand. No bitterness clinging to the air. No sense of exile, just stillness. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting it all settle, the hurt, the years of silence, the slow rebuild of something broken but not gone. When Wade came downstairs, he leaned against the doorway. I didn't realize how much damage she did until after she left. It wasn't just the words. It was how small we all started to feel around her. I nodded. She liked power. People like that mistake control for love. He sat beside me. I let her do it. To me, to you. And now you're undoing it. I said, that's enough. He rubbed his face. I wish Dad were here. I looked at Noelle's photo on the dresser. He is. We sat in silence until Emma's voice drifted down the stairs, singing a lullaby off-key. I smiled. She's got your rhythm. Poor kid, he said, laughing. When I left that night, Wade walked me to the car. You sure you don't want to stay? I like my little studio. I said, it's home now. He looked thoughtful. You know, when Romy left, she took the fancy furniture but left the plain stuff. The house looks better with less. Most things do, I said. He hugged me before I could react, his arms tight and trembling. Thank you, Mom. For what? For not letting her break you. I drove back under a full moon, the road quiet except for crickets and the hum of tires. I didn't feel like a visitor or a survivor. I felt steady, whole. Back at the studio, Diane had left a jar of peach preserves on the steps with a note, for sweet mornings. I smiled and carried it inside. The next morning, I woke early, spread toast with the jam, and watched the sunrise through the maple branches. Light spilled over everything, soft, forgiving, new. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Martin, the lawyer. Myrtle, he said, I wanted to let you know, the estate file's officially closed. You're clear of all liens, and the property is fully yours. Wade signed a statement to that effect. Thank you, Martin. He hesitated. You sound lighter. I am, I said. Sometimes peace just takes paperwork. After hanging up, I opened my notebook and wrote another line. Healing doesn't come with grand gestures. It comes with quiet mornings. By late afternoon, I was back at the garden, trimming the tomato vines and humming the same tune Emma had sung. Evelyn noticed. You seem brighter today, she said. I visited home, I told her. And? It's still standing, I said. That's enough. That night, Wade called again. Mom, Emma wants you to tell her bedtime story over the phone. Which one? She said, the one about the magic beans. So I told it again. This time softer, my voice drifting through the phone line, how a woman planted seeds of courage and kindness. And how they grew, not into a castle, but into a garden full of peace. When Emma whispered, "Good night, Grandma," I felt something inside finally settle. I turned off the lamp and looked at Noelle's photo one last time before bed. We did all right, I whispered. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. If you're still here with me, thank you. Tell me where you're watching from. Maybe somewhere out there, another woman is finally finding her way back home too. The end of summer came slow that year, the air heavy with heat and the smell of ripe fruit from Diane's trees. I'd gotten used to the rhythm of my new life, the morning walks, the garden, the quiet evenings with a book and a cup of tea. Peace, I realized, wasn't the absence of noise. It was the absence of fear. One morning, Diane knocked on my door holding a small basket of peaches. You'll like these, she said, they taste like sunshine. I laughed. You've turned into quite the poet. Old age does that, she said, winking. Eat them before they go soft. After she left, I sat by the window, slicing one open. The juice ran down my fingers, sweet and sticky. I thought of Emma, how she'd scrunch her nose and call it too fuzzy. I smiled to myself and wiped my hands on a napkin. The studio felt warm, full, alive. That afternoon, I decided to visit the house again. I didn't tell Wade. I wanted to see it on my own terms. The drive was familiar now, but it felt different, lighter. As if the road had finally forgiven me for leaving. When I turned onto Maple Drive, the house came into view. The lawn was green, the porch newly painted white. A small swing hung from the old oak tree. For a moment, I stood by the fence, watching the wind push the swing gently back and forth. Wade came out, surprised but smiling. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to see the swing," I said. "You finally hung it." Emma wouldn't stop asking, he said. Inside, the house looked brighter than ever. The curtains were open, sunlight spilling across the living room floor. The dining table, our table, still gleamed from the last time I'd seen it. On the wall, new photos, Wade and Emma planting roses in the backyard. Emma holding a cake with candles shaped like hearts. "I like what you've done," I said. "It feels different now," he said, "peaceful." We sat at the kitchen table with lemonade. Wade's eyes softened when he looked at me. "Romy called last week," he said carefully. I waited. "She wants to talk. She said she's sorry." "Do you believe her?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe she's just realizing what she lost." "People often do," I said, "after it's gone." He looked at me, uncertain. "Would you ever talk to her?" I set down my glass. If she wanted forgiveness, she'd have to earn it. But I don't need to carry her anymore. He nodded slowly. I think I needed to hear that. Emma came running in, her hair in 2 braids. "Grandma, come see my garden." She grabbed my hand, pulling me outside. Behind the house, a small patch of earth held rows of tiny green shoots. She knelt proudly. "Daddy says they're roses, but I think they're magic beans." I smiled. "Then maybe they'll grow into something even better." That evening, we grilled hamburgers in the backyard. Just like old times, the fireflies came out early. Blinking between the trees, Wade turned on the porch light and said, "You know, Mom, it feels like he's still here." "He is," I said. "He always will be." When I left, Emma hugged me tight. "Next time, we're making peach pie," she said. "I'll bring the peaches," I promised. Back at the studio, I found a letter waiting in the mailbox. It was from Romy. The handwriting was neat, controlled, the kind of careful penmanship that hides shaking hands. "Dear Mrs. Harper, I know I don't deserve a response. I said things I can't take back. I thought I was protecting our life. But really, I was destroying it. I lost my marriage, and it's my fault. You didn't deserve what I said that night. I'm sorry." There was no signature at the end, just a smudge where her pen had stopped. I folded the letter and placed it between the pages of my notebook. No anger rose up, no satisfaction, just a quiet kind of closure. Some apologies aren't for fixing things, they're for finishing them. The next day, I met Martin at the bank to finalize the transfer of the property title. "You're now the sole holder," he said, sliding the paper across. "It's officially yours again." "Thank you," I said. My voice came out softer than I expected. He looked at me over his glasses. "What will you do with it?" "Keep it," I said, "but not live in it. Wade and Emma can have it when I'm gone." He smiled. "That's a wise choice." I walked out of the bank into the bright afternoon. The street smelled of asphalt and promise. For the first time in years, there were no shadows trailing behind me. That evening, Diane joined me on the porch. "You look different," she said. "Peace suits you." "It's lighter than anger," I said. She nodded. "It always is." We watched the sun dip behind the maple tree, the sky turning gold and then lavender. A few kids rode bikes down the street, their laughter carrying on the wind. Diane handed me a glass of iced tea. "To second chances," she said. "To peace," I replied. Later, alone in the studio, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just means I've decided to stop bleeding from it." I set the pen down and looked around my small home. Everything here had a place, simple, quiet, earned. That night, Wade called again. "Mom, we're having a barbecue for Emma's birthday next weekend. She wants you to come." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. When the day came, I wore my blue dress. The one Noelle used to say brought out my eyes. The backyard was filled with laughter, balloons, and the smell of grilled corn. Emma ran circles around the table, her curls bouncing in the sunlight. Wade handed me a plate. You did this, he said. What do you mean? You brought this piece. You held the line when I couldn't. I looked around, the open windows, the bright sky, the family whole again. We both did, I said. After cake, Emma came over with a slice and whispered, Grandma, did you know Daddy sings to the roses when nobody's looking? I laughed. That must be why they're growing so fast. When the sun began to set, I walked to the edge of the yard. The air was warm, the kind of warmth that seeps into your bones. Wade joined me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. Thank you for coming home, he said. I never really left, I replied. As I drove back that night, the road shimmered with the last light of day. The world looked open again, wide, forgiving, alive. Back at the studio, I placed a single rose from Emma's garden into a small jar of water. The petals caught the glow of the lamp. Soft and perfect, I sat beside it and whispered to the quiet room. We made it, Noel, all of us. If you're listening to this, thank you for staying. Tell me where you're watching from. Maybe you've found your peace, too, or maybe you're still searching. Either way, keep going, it's closer than you think. Fall crept in quietly. The air carried that sharp edge between warm and cold, the kind that makes you pull your sweater a little tighter. The leaves along the street turned gold and rust, drifting down like slow rain. From my window, I could see the maple tree shedding piece by piece, as if it, too, was learning how to let go. I'd been in the studio nearly a year now. The days had a rhythm I could trust, morning coffee, garden visits, afternoons helping Diane bake pies for the church fundraiser. I wasn't lonely, I was alone, and that was different. One Friday, Wade called. Mom, he said, I've got some news. His voice sounded lighter than I'd heard in a long time. The store promoted me, management position. That's wonderful, I said. Your father would have been proud. I hope so, he said. He'd tell me not to screw it up. I laughed softly. He probably would. Then his tone shifted. Romy's been calling again. She says she's moving out of state. Wants to sell her half of the business. She still has a business? I asked. Barely, but she said something strange. She thanked me. Said losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to her. Some people have to hit the ground before they look up, I said. Yeah, he murmured. I think she finally did. He paused for a moment. Anyway, I was thinking, Emma and I are going to take a little trip next weekend. Maybe you could come? Where? Dad's lake, the cabin. It's still standing, needs a little cleaning, but I thought, I'd like that, I said. The drive out to the lake took 2 hours. The road wound through pines and over creeks, the air thinning until it tasted like cedar. When we arrived, the cabin looked almost exactly as I remembered, the same worn porch, the same chipped blue door. Dust clung to the windows, but inside, it smelled like pine wood and memories. Emma ran straight to the dock, her hair flying. It's so big, she yelled. Grandma, can we swim? Not today, sweetheart, the water's too cold. Wade opened the windows, letting in the lake breeze. I used to think this place was boring, he said. Now it feels like breathing. That's what getting older does, I said. Teaches you to like the quiet. We spent the afternoon sweeping floors and scrubbing countertops. Emma found an old deck of cards and insisted on playing War until sunset. When night fell, we lit a small fire outside. The lake reflected the stars so clearly it looked like another sky beneath us. Wade poked at the fire with a stick. Mom, do you ever think about starting over? Like, really starting over? I already did, I said. He smiled. Fair enough, but I mean, maybe selling the studio. Moving closer to us? I like where I am, I said gently, but I'll visit more. I'd like that, he said. Emma fell asleep curled up on my lap, smelling like campfire and sugar. Wade watched her for a long time. She's everything, he said quietly. She is, I agreed, and she's watching you, so make sure she sees what love is supposed to look like. He nodded, eyes wet in the firelight. I'm trying, Mom, I really am. Later, after he carried Emma inside, I stayed by the fire a while longer. The night was still, the only sound the soft slap of water against the dock. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "We did it, Noel, he's finding his way." When I went inside, Wade was asleep on the couch. Emma curled against him. I covered them with a blanket and sat in the old rocking chair by the window. The same chair I used to rock him in when he was small. The boards creaked the same familiar rhythm, slow, steady, safe. Morning came pale and silver. I stepped outside with my coffee, the mug warming my hands. Across the lake, fog drifted low, curling around the trees. I thought of how far we'd come, how a single cruel word had cracked everything open. And how, somehow, the light had gotten in through the cracks. Wade joined me, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early." "Habit," I said. He leaned against the railing. "I've been thinking, maybe we should keep this place. Fix it up." "You should," I said. "It's good soil for new roots." He smiled. "Emma said she wants to plant roses here too." "Of course she does," I said. We spent the morning patching the porch and clearing branches. When the sun climbed higher, Wade brought out a photo from his wallet, one I hadn't seen in years. It was the three of us standing by this very dock. Noel's arm slung around my shoulder. "I found it in a box," he said. "Figured it belongs here." He nailed it to the wall inside, right above the mantel. For the first time in a long while, the cabin felt like a home again. That afternoon, we packed up to leave. Before I got in the car, I took one last look at the lake, its surface calm and bright. "Goodbye, old friend," I whispered. Back at the studio, I unpacked slowly. The quiet welcomed me like an old companion. On the table, Diane had left another note. "Stop by for pie. The world's too big for small hearts." I smiled. That evening, I sat at my desk and opened the notebook again. The pages were almost full now. I wrote, "Peace isn't loud, it's the sound of forgiveness breathing." As I closed it, the phone buzzed. A text from Wade. "Emma says to tell Grandma she loves her more than all the stars on the lake." I typed back, "Tell her the stars agree." The days after that blurred gently together. I helped Diane pack apples for canning, joined Evelyn at the garden to prepare it for winter, and even started teaching a small writing group at the library. They were women my age, widows, mothers, grandmothers, each with their own kind of quiet grief. I told them, "Write it down. You don't have to make it pretty. Just make it honest." One woman asked, "How did you forgive what they did?" I thought for a moment. By realizing I didn't want to carry it into my next morning, I said, that was enough. At night, I dreamed of the house sometimes, not the pain, but the light, Wade laughing, Emma chasing butterflies, the kitchen filled with the smell of something baking. It wasn't a dream of loss anymore. It was a dream of survival. A few weeks later, a small package arrived. Inside was a drawing from Emma, me standing by the lake, holding a rose. Across the top, in uneven handwriting, it said, "Grandma fixed the magic beans." I pinned it above my desk. It stayed there, bright and innocent, reminding me that healing has a face. It's small, curious, and calls you Grandma. When the first snow fell, Diane brought Coco upstairs, and we watched from the window. The street glowed under the lamplight, flakes swirling like confetti. She said, "You think you'll ever move back in with your family?" I smiled. I already did, just not under the same roof. Before bed, I stood by the window, watching the snow collect on the maple branches. I whispered, "Good night, Noel. Thank you for leaving me strong enough to stay. If you followed this far, thank you. Tell me the name of your town in the comments. Maybe, somewhere out there, you're learning to breathe again too." Winter settled in fully by December. Quiet and unhurried, the air outside the studio was sharp enough to bite, the kind that turned your breath into small clouds. I'd grown used to the cold mornings, wrapping my hands around a mug of coffee before even opening the blinds. Snow covered the street in a soft blanket that made everything still. Diane and I spent most days baking, filling the air with the smell of cinnamon and sugar. She liked to hum old gospel songs while she worked. I mostly listened, smiling to myself. There was peace in that. Two women who'd lost enough learning how to fill the quiet again. One Saturday, Wade called, "Mom, we're decorating the tree tonight. You and Diane should come over." Is Emma excited? She's been counting ornaments since breakfast. We arrived just after sunset. The house glowed from the windows. Warm and golden. It didn't feel like the same house I'd left a year ago, it felt alive. Emma met us at the door wearing a reindeer sweater and a grin too big for her face. Grandma, come see. In the living room stood a tall pine. The kind that filled the whole corner. Ornaments dangled unevenly, the lights blinking like tiny hearts. On the table sat a plate of cookies and a small stack of presents wrapped in brown paper. Wade was stringing popcorn garlands while humming off-key. I stood there, taking it all in. This was what rebuilding looked like. Not grand gestures, just laughter, light, and forgiveness stitched into everyday moments. Emma grabbed my hand. You hang the angel. Grandma, Daddy says you always did it best. I looked at Wade. He nodded. It's tradition. I climbed the small stool and placed the angel at the top. Her dress shimmered under the lights. Wings delicate and still. For a second, I thought of Noel standing behind me, steadying the ladder like he always did. The memory didn't hurt anymore, it just felt warm. After dinner, we sat by the fire. Emma dozed off on the couch, her head resting on Diane's shoulder. Wade handed me a small box. It's not much, he said, but I wanted you to have it. Inside was a silver keychain with a tiny charm shaped like a rose. On the back, it said, "For every door you opened for us." I blinked hard, the firelight catching the edge of my tears. It's beautiful, I said. He shrugged. It's true. Later that night, when Diane and I were leaving, Wade walked us to the car. Mom, he said, I'm thinking of selling the business and starting something new. Maybe a landscaping company. Something real. Something you can grow, I said. He smiled. Exactly. The next few weeks passed in a gentle rhythm. The snow piled higher, and the days grew shorter. I taught the writing group how to craft letters they'd never send, letters to people who'd hurt them. Or people they missed. I wrote one myself. To Romy. It wasn't angry, just honest. You called me, the maid. I wrote. You thought that made me small. But I wasn't cleaning up your mess, I was reclaiming my dignity. You helped me find my edge again. I hope you find yours. I didn't sign it. Some words didn't need a name attached. By late January, Wade called with another surprise. Mom, the roses bloomed, he said. In January? I know, it's crazy. Must have been the mild winter. Emma swears they're your magic beans. I laughed. Then make a wish for me. I already did, he said quietly, that you'd never stop writing. I didn't realize how much that meant until I hung up. That night, I sat at my desk, pen in hand. The snow outside caught the moonlight, glowing like crushed diamonds. I began writing again, not about loss this time, but about what came after. The quiet mornings, the second chances, the laughter that returned like a familiar song. Every page felt like breathing. In February, I received another letter, this time from Romy. The envelope was postmarked from Oregon. Inside, a single page. I saw Wade's business listed online. I'm glad he's doing well. I've been sober 6 months. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I remember the way you looked at me when you handed me those keys. It took me this long to understand what strength really looks like. I hope you're happy. I folded it carefully and placed it in the back of the notebook. I didn't need to reply. The world has its own way of circling back with lessons. Spring arrived earlier than anyone expected. The snow melted in days, leaving puddles that reflected the blue sky. Diane's roses started to bud again. Stubborn and brave, I helped her prune them, hands steady on the shears. You ever going to tell that story of yours? She asked one afternoon. You've got enough for a book. Maybe, I said, or maybe it's enough just to live it. She chuckled, spoken like a woman who finally likes her own company. That weekend, I joined Wade and Emma at the community garden. The air smelled of earth and new beginnings. Emma wore overalls and a floppy hat too big for her head. Grandma, she said, Daddy says the roses survived winter because they're strong. Like you. I knelt beside her, brushing soil from her cheek. No, sweetheart, they survived because they kept their roots. Wade looked up from the wheelbarrow and smiled. Same as us. We spent the day planting seeds, tomatoes, lavender, and a single row of pink roses for Noel. When we finished, we stood back to admire the rows of dark soil, ready for whatever came next. As we packed up, I noticed Wade looking at the horizon, where the sun dipped low over the field. "Mom," he said, "I've been meaning to tell you something. I met someone." I raised an eyebrow. "It's new," he said quickly. "She's kind and patient." I didn't want to say anything until I knew it wasn't just noise. "Does Emma like her?" "She loves her," he said. "Then that's all that matters." He looked relieved. "You don't think it's too soon?" "Life doesn't wait for permission," I said, just for honesty. That night, I sat by my window again, the scent of soil still on my hands. I thought about how far we'd come, from that dinner table where silence felt like punishment, to this moment of peace, soft as dusk. I took out my notebook and wrote, "Every ending holds a seed. You just have to plant it somewhere kind." Before turning off the light, I looked at Noel's photo. "We're all right," I whispered. "You can rest easy." Outside, the wind moved through the maple branches like a sigh of contentment. The house stood solid, the roses waiting for morning, the world finally still enough to listen. If you're here with me at this part of the story, thank you. Tell me where you're watching from. I hope wherever you are, something beautiful is starting to grow again. By the time summer returned, the roses were taller than Emma. She called them Grandma's guards, and every morning, she'd run outside with a watering can bigger than her arms and talk to each one as if it were alive. Wade said it was a ritual now. She says the roses tell her secrets. He laughed. One afternoon, I drove over to see them. The air was thick with the smell of cut grass and barbecue smoke. The porch was covered with flower pots, lavender, basil, even a stubborn cactus Wade swore he could keep alive. The house looked like it had finally exhaled. Emma ran up and hugged me tight. "Grandma, look, the pink ones bloomed." I knelt beside her, touching the petals gently. They were perfect, soft as silk, glowing under the sun. "They're beautiful," I said. "You've been taking good care of them." "I tell them stories," she said proudly. "Happy ones." That night, we ate dinner on the back porch. Fireflies floated across the yard, tiny lanterns flickering in the dusk. Wade grilled chicken, and I made my potato salad, the same recipe Noel loved. The table was simple, just laughter, lemonade, and peace that didn't need to be named. After we ate, Wade brought out a folder. "I wanted to show you something," he said. Inside were sketches, plans for his new business, landscaping and outdoor design. He explained, "I've already got 2 clients." "That's fast," I said. He smiled. "Turns out people like when you bring life back to forgotten places." I ran my fingers over the drawings. Curved paths, rose beds, shaded benches. "It suits you," I said. "You always had an eye for beauty." "Maybe I got that from you," he said quietly. When Emma went inside to watch a movie, Wade and I stayed out under the string lights. The night hummed with crickets. He took a sip of his beer and said, "Do you ever think about Dad?" "Every day," I said. "Me too, but it doesn't hurt as much anymore." "That's how you know he did his job right," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "You know, I used to think you left because you were angry. But now I see, you left to save us. If you hadn't walked away, we'd still be living in that tension." I nodded. Sometimes love looks like leaving. He leaned back in his chair, eyes shining. "I get that now." The next week, Diane and I took a short trip to the coast. The ocean spread wide and endless before us, the sky pale blue like an old memory. We walked along the sand collecting shells, and for the first time in years, I laughed without guilt. At night, we sat on the balcony, sipping tea as the waves rolled in. "You ever going to write that story?" Diane asked. "I already am," I said, "just one part at a time." She smiled. "Then make sure the woman in it gets her piece." She already did. When I came home, a letter was waiting from Martin, the lawyer. Inside was a check, the refund from overpaid taxes on the house. A small amount, but enough to make me pause. I decided to do something with it. 2 weeks later, the community garden held a small event, planting day. I used the money to buy new benches and a plaque that read, "For everyone who learned that growth can start again." The local paper took a photo of all of us. Our hands dirty, our smiles real. Evelyn said, "We'll put this in the newsletter. You're our quiet miracle, Myrtle." I just laughed and kept digging. That night, Wade called. Emma saw the photo online. He said, "She said you look famous." "I'm famous for tomatoes," I said. He chuckled. "She wants to bring her class there for a field trip. Tell them they'll need gloves," I said. As summer deepened, the days stretched long and golden. My studio filled with light. I started writing letters again, this time to people who'd never read them. Noelle. My younger self. Even Romy. Not to reopen wounds, but to close them properly. "Dear Romy," I wrote one evening, "I hope you're somewhere that smells like salt and new beginnings. I hope you've forgiven yourself." I have. I sealed the letter and placed it under Noelle's photo. It wasn't about sending it. It was about setting it down. In August, Wade invited me to see his first finished project, a small park renovation downtown. When I arrived, he and Emma were standing under a newly planted oak tree. A plaque at its base read, "For those who stayed kind when it wasn't easy." Emma picked the words. He said, "They're perfect," I whispered. The park looked like a dream, clean paths. Flowers blooming in every color. Benches shaded by new trees. Children played nearby, their laughter mingling with birdsong. I stood there a long time, feeling proud in a way I couldn't explain. Afterward, we went for ice cream. Emma chose mint chocolate chip. Wade got vanilla, and I had coffee flavor. "You know, Mom," Wade said, "when I look around, it's hard to believe this all started with one ugly night at the dinner table." I smiled softly. "That's where a lot of good stories start." He nodded. "You turned it into something better." "We all did," I said. When they dropped me off that evening, Emma hugged me hard. "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to be like you." I laughed. "You already are, sweetheart, you just don't know it yet." That night, the air smelled like rain. I left the window open and listened to the distant thunder. For the first time, it didn't scare me. It sounded like a heartbeat, steady, alive, moving forward. I opened my notebook again, almost at the last page now, and wrote. The storm didn't break me. It washed everything clean. Outside, lightning flashed once, painting the room in white. I sat still, smiling. Later that week, I received another call from Wade. "Mom, we're thinking of starting a scholarship in Dad's name. Something small, for kids who want to study horticulture." "That's beautiful," I said. "He'd love that. We want you to be part of it." "I will," I promised. When we launched it a month later, I stood beside Wade and Emma at the ribbon cutting. Cameras clicked, people clapped, but all I felt was calm. The plaque behind us read, "The Noelle Harper Foundation for Growth. For Grace. For Good Soil." As the crowd began to thin, Wade turned to me. "You ready to close the book on this chapter?" I smiled. "I think it closed itself." That evening, back in my studio, I sat by the window one last time with my cup of tea. The air was cool, sweet with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. I thought of every moment that had brought me here, the betrayal, the silence, the small victories, the laughter returning one piece at a time. I whispered, "We made it, Noelle." And maybe, just maybe, the wind outside whispered back, "If you're still listening, thank you. Tell me where you're watching from. Maybe tonight, somewhere between your own storms, you'll find a little quiet, too." Autumn came again, soft and slow, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. The air smelled like wood smoke and old leaves, and the nights started to stretch longer than the days. I'd learned to love that in-between time, the quiet before winter, when everything seems to breathe differently. The community garden was closing for the season. Evelyn handed me a bundle of dried herbs tied with twine. "For luck," she said, "and for courage, though I doubt you need much of that anymore." I smiled, maybe just enough to get through the cold. At home, I hung the herbs by the window and made a pot of tea. The light that afternoon was golden, slow-moving. On the table sat my notebook, almost full. I'd been writing less these days, not because there wasn't anything left to say, but because peace doesn't make noise. Wade called that evening. "Mom," he said, "we got the first scholarship applications in. Kids from all over. One of them wrote that your story inspired her to go into horticulture." "My story?" I asked, laughing softly. He chuckled. "Yeah, I may have told it to the local paper when they did the article." "Wade Harper," I said, pretending to scold, "you turned me into a headline." He grinned through the phone. "Only the good kind." The next day, Emma called after school. "Grandma, guess what? Our class is reading stories about strong women. And Daddy told my teacher about you." "Oh, really?" I said. "Yep. I said my grandma's not just strong, she's kind. That's better." I felt something bloom in my chest. Quiet and bright. "You're right, sweetheart. Kind is better." Weeks passed, and the air grew colder. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Oregon. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. "Dear Mrs. Harper, I heard about the scholarship. I thought you should know I applied for the administrative position they posted. I want to help, even in small ways. I'm still in recovery, still learning, but I'm working with a counseling group for women rebuilding their lives. You were right, I had to lose everything to see the truth. Thank you for handing me those keys. It took me a long time to realize you weren't giving up. You were setting me free. Romy." I folded the letter slowly and placed it beside Noelle's photo. For a moment, I just sat there, the world very still. I whispered, "Good, Romy, keep going." That night, I met Diane for dinner at a little diner near the bus station. The kind with booths that squeak and pie that tastes like childhood. She looked at me over her coffee cup. "You've got that faraway look again," she said. "I got a letter," I told her. "From her?" I nodded. "Well," Diane said, setting her cup down, "I hope she finally learned what you were trying to teach her." "I think she did," I said. The bell over the diner door jingled. A group of teenagers came in, laughing, shoving each other in line. I watched them and thought how strange and beautiful it is. How life keeps moving no matter who's watching. When I got home, the first snow had started to fall, small flakes drifting past the streetlights like feathers. I stood on the porch for a long time, letting them melt against my skin. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, soft and low. A week later, Wade invited me to a dinner celebrating the first scholarship recipient. "It's just a small event," he said, "but it would mean a lot if you came." "Of course," I said. The hall was decorated with autumn flowers and candles. The young woman receiving the award stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "I didn't think I could rebuild my life," she said, "until I read about someone who did. Someone who didn't stop when it got hard. Someone who made peace sound possible." I didn't realize I was crying until I felt Diane squeeze my hand. "She's talking about you, you know," she whispered. After the ceremony, the young woman came up to me. "Mrs. Harper," she said, "your story gave me hope. My mother said I'd never make it. Now I'm going to college because of you." I touched her hand gently. "No, dear, you're going to college because of you. You just needed someone to remind you it could be done." Outside, the air was sharp and clear. Wade joined me by the steps. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," I said. "Your father would have liked tonight." "He'd have been proud," Wade said, "of you, of all of this." We walked to the car together, our footsteps crunching over the frost. "Mom," he said, "I know I've said this before, but thank you for everything." "You've already thanked me," I said. "Then I'll keep doing it," he said, smiling. A few days later, I received an envelope from the Scholarship Foundation. Inside was a photograph from the ceremony, a group shot of us all smiling under the banner. The caption read, "The First Bloom." I framed it and set it beside Noelle's picture. For the first time, the two photos didn't feel like past and present, they just felt like one story continuing. By Christmas, the house was alive again with lights. Wade and Emma came over to my studio instead of hosting. We cooked together in my small kitchen, bumping elbows and laughing over spilled flour. Diane brought her famous pie, and we sat close, sharing stories, music, and quiet joy. Later, after they'd left, I stood by the window watching snow fall again. The world was white and still. I thought about that first night. The one where Romy called me the maid, asterisk, and how far we'd come from that moment. How something cruel had turned into a bridge, not a wall. I whispered, "You see, Noelle, everything found its place." Then I took the last clean page of my notebook and wrote, "Love doesn't vanish when people fail you. It just changes shape until you're ready to hold it again." I closed the notebook and placed it on the table, beside the roses that Emma had brought me from her garden. Their petals were fading, curling at the edges, but they still smelled sweet. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with me. Tell me where you're watching from. Maybe your story is still unfolding. Or maybe you're at peace now too. Either way, remember this. Every ending is just a quieter beginning waiting to bloom. The new year began with pale sunlight and the slow drip of melting snow. The world outside my window looked washed clean, like someone had taken a soft cloth to the sky. I made coffee, sat at the little table, and stared at the empty space where my notebook had been. I'd finished it a week ago, filled every page, and now that it was done, I felt a strange kind of stillness, like when a song ends, and you're not sure if you should clap or just sit quietly. A letter arrived that morning from the scholarship board. Inside was a thank you note from the first student, now away at school. She'd enclosed a photo of herself standing beside a greenhouse, her hands covered in dirt and pride. Asterisk, I think of your story every time I plant something new. Asterisk, she wrote. Asterisk, you taught me that things grow better after they've been broken once. I placed the letter beside the framed photo from the ceremony. For a long time, I just looked at it. Some words don't need to be reread, they just stay with you. That afternoon, Diane stopped by with 2 mugs of cocoa. I figured you'd be writing again, she said. I'm between stories, I told her. She smiled. You ever think that maybe the story doesn't end, it just changes writers? Maybe, I said, or maybe it finally learned how to tell itself. Wade called later that evening. Mom, I've got news, he said. The Scholarship Foundation got another donation. A big one. Really? From who? Anonymous, he said, but the check came from Oregon. I didn't need to ask. Romy, I said quietly. He hesitated. You think so? I know so, I said. She's finally paying something forward. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It felt peaceful. Over the next few weeks, I started volunteering at the community center, helping with a program for older women learning basic computer skills. We've all been rebooting, Diane joked one morning, and everyone laughed. There was something beautiful about watching women my age typing with cautious fingers, trying to find themselves in a new world. One of them, a woman named Lila, asked, "Aren't you the lady from that newspaper article? The one who started the garden project?" I smiled. Maybe, but it wasn't just me. She leaned closer. Well, whoever it was, it gave me the courage to leave a bad situation. So thank you, even if it wasn't you. I didn't correct her. I just reached over and squeezed her hand. You did that yourself, I said. By spring, the roses behind the old house bloomed again. Wade sent a picture. Emma standing between them, grinning, both hands stained with soil. Asterisk, they're yours, Grandma, asterisk, the message said. Asterisk, the magic beans made it another year. I printed the photo and pinned it beside my desk. Some people measure success by money or applause. For me, it was that grin, muddy hands, pink flowers, and a little girl who believed in magic. One warm Sunday, Wade and Emma drove down to take me to the park. It had been a year since the ribbon cutting for the scholarship fund. The park was greener now, fuller, more alive. The oak tree they'd planted in Noelle's memory was growing strong, its branches stretching toward the sky. Emma placed her palm against the bark. Grandma, it's bigger than me now. It'll always be bigger than us, I said softly. We sat on the bench beneath it, watching families pass by. Wade turned to me. Mom, I've been thinking about something. What's that? I want to buy the studio from you. Not to move you out, just to keep it in the family. So you never have to worry about rent again. I looked at him, surprised. You don't need to do that. I want to, he said. It's time I took care of you for a change. I smiled. You already have, Wade, you just didn't notice. But a week later, he showed up with papers and a grin. Too late, it's done. He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a deed and a note that read, "For the woman who taught me how to keep the lights on, both in the house and in my heart." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I laughed through them. "You're your father's son," I said. He nodded. "I hope so." Later that month, Romy sent another letter, not handwritten this time, but typed neatly, like something she'd worked hard to get right. "Dear Mrs. Harper, thank you for letting me be part of something good. I've started volunteering with a women's shelter in Portland. Some of the women remind me of who I used to be, angry, lost, pretending strength was louder than kindness. I tell them about a woman who once handed me house keys and said, 'Good luck with the mortgage.' I thought it was cruelty back then. Now I know it was mercy. Thank you for teaching me the kind of strength." I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my new notebook. This one had a red cover. I hadn't written much in it yet. Just a few lines. "Peace isn't loud. It's a quiet room and someone who finally knows she belongs there." Summer came again. Diane's health began to slow her down, so I visited her more often. We spent afternoons in her kitchen, talking about small things, the weather, the price of bread, the way life never really ends. It just changes shape. One evening, as I was leaving, she said, "Promise me one thing, Myrtle." "What's that?" "Keep telling the story, not the pain part, the part after." "I promise," I said. And I did. When the local library asked if I'd host a small talk about resilience, I almost said no, but Wade insisted. "You've been teaching people how to heal without even trying," he said. "It's time you owned it." So I stood in that small room under the hum of fluorescent lights and told my story, not the polished version, but the real one. I spoke about betrayal, grief, and the slow work of forgiveness. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then an older man in the back stood up and said, "I thought I was too old to start again. You just proved me wrong." That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars, my heart light. A few weeks later, I visited the lake cabin again. The air was warm, the water still. I sat on the dock with my feet dangling above the surface. The same place where, a year ago, I'd told Noelle we'd done all right. This time, I didn't have to say anything. The quiet said it for me. When I drove back to town, the maple trees were starting to bloom again. The same trees that once watched me walk away from everything now seemed to whisper welcome. I parked outside the studio, stepped inside, and felt the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. The smell of roses drifted in through the open window. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and wrote one more line in the red notebook. I thought my story ended the night I handed her those keys. But endings are just turns in the road. And sometimes, if you keep walking, peace is waiting right around the bend. If you're here with me now, thank you for listening all this way. Tell me where you're watching from. Maybe your story hasn't found its quiet yet, but trust me, it will. The light always comes back, even for those of us who once stood in the dark. It was early morning when I woke to the sound of birds outside the studio window. The light was soft, stretching across the walls like a memory. I sat up slowly, the air cool and calm, and for a moment, I didn't move at all. I just breathed. There was no rush anymore. No phone ringing, no one calling me names, no sense of walking on eggshells in my own home. Just the hum of life, gentle and steady. On the small table by the window sat the red notebook. I opened it, running my fingers across the pages, reading bits of the sentences I'd written over the last few months. Peace isn't loud. Every ending holds a seed. The storm didn't break me. They weren't just words now, they were proof. That afternoon, Wade and Emma came by with takeout and a surprise. "You're coming with us," Wade said. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You'll see," he said, smiling like a man who finally knew where he was leading his family. We drove out of town, past the fields and the church steeple, until the road opened up to the horizon. The sky was that shade of gold that only happens right before sunset. When we turned into the park, I knew. It was the same park where the oak tree grew. The one planted in Noelle's memory. But this time, there was something new, a small bench at its base. Polished and waiting, a plaque was set into the wood. Wade took my hand. "We wanted you to see it first." I leaned closer. The plaque read, "For Myrtle Harper, who turned loss into legacy, asterisk. May every seed you planted keep growing, asterisk." For a long time, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, but it wasn't sadness, it was something fuller. Something like gratitude wrapped in air. Emma climbed onto the bench beside me. "Grandma," she whispered, "Daddy says this is your garden too." "It is, sweetheart," I said softly. "Everywhere I go, something grows." We sat there as the sun sank lower. Light filtering through the branches, turning everything gold. The leaves swayed gently, whispering secrets in the wind. Wade stood behind us, hands in his pockets, his eyes bright. "I used to hate this time of day," he said quietly. "It felt like endings, now it just feels like home." I smiled. "That's because you stopped chasing the light and started living in it." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You always did have a way with words." We stayed until the park lights flickered on. Fireflies began to appear, tiny glimmers floating through the dusk. Emma tried to catch one, cupping it gently in her small hands before letting it go. "It tickles," she said, giggling. Wade looked at me. "Do you think Dad would have liked this?" "He would have built it himself," I said, "but I think he's proud you did." When they dropped me off later, the moon had risen high over the street. The studio windows glowed faintly from the lamp inside. Wade walked me to the door, Emma half asleep in his arms. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said. "I just wanted you to see it finished." "I'm glad you did," I said. "It's beautiful." Before he left, he kissed my forehead. "Love you, Mom." "I love you too, Wade," I said, my voice catching on the words. After the car disappeared down the street, I went inside and poured a cup of tea. The room smelled faintly of jasmine and paper, my favorite mix of peace. On the desk, beside the red notebook, sat Noelle's photo and the small ceramic bird I'd found that first week after I left the house. I picked it up, turning it in my hand. "You see, Noelle?" I whispered. "He's all right. We all are." Outside, the wind moved through the maple tree, the same tree that had once shaded my hardest mornings. Its leaves rustled softly, like an answer. I sat down and opened my notebook one last time. The final page was blank. Waiting, I took a deep breath and began to write. Once, I thought forgiveness meant forgetting. But it doesn't. It means remembering without reopening the wound. It means standing in the same sunlight that once burned you, and realizing it's warm again. It means looking at the people who hurt you and hoping they find peace too, because you already have yours. When I finished, I closed the notebook gently. No flourish, no final word needed, just the sound of the cover shutting, like a soft exhale. That night, I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker on. Somewhere, in the distance, a train passed, its low hum fading into the quiet. I thought about how far we'd come, from that kitchen where a cruel word shattered everything, to this moment, where even silence felt like music. I smiled, not the kind of smile that hides pain, but the kind that says I made it. And maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting the fire, but learning how to walk through the ashes barefoot and unafraid. I turned off the lamp, leaving the window open so the night breeze could drift in. The stars outside blinked softly, scattered like seeds across the sky. If you're listening now, thank you for walking with me all this way. Maybe your story has cracks too. Maybe you lost something you thought you couldn't live without. But if I've learned anything, it's this: broken ground is where the wildflowers grow. So wherever you are, take a breath, step forward, the light always finds its way back. And that's how my story ends, not with anger, not with loss, but with roots deep in the soil, and peace blooming quietly all around me.